Imagine yourself vomiting blood for several months, and the person who becomes your caretaker is your roommate. Our guest today went through this medical scare and found himself having feelings for his roommate. Never having been with a man, this became unknown territory for the two. After 2 years of exploring the relationship and dating women in between, Mike began to rethink his sexuality in his first same-sex relationship. He is here today to tell us his provocative and vulnerable story, while reminding us that life is a surprising adventure, and sometimes things don't always work out as planned. Hi, Mike. Welcome to Comfort Kills. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks. So I'm really excited to speak to you more in depth than from our meet and greet, just in regards to what your story looks like. For season 2, my season premiere were 2 caretakers. And so in this sense, we are now flipping the script and we are talking about you from the patient perspective, having a caretaker. So I'm very excited to hear about just how everything kind of happened and what your story looks like and where your journey brought you here today.
Yeah, thank you. So my story starts with, I was pretty successful early in life. I
Mhm.
owned a PR agency. I started it when I was 22 years old.
Oh, wow.
We worked with a lot of healthcare politicians, tech
Mhm.
billionaires, celebrities, people like that.
Nice.
And a few years after that, I woke up one day and I was vomiting blood just out of the
Mm.
blue.
Mhm.
And that didn't stop for a few months. And so every day I was vomiting blood. You can imagine this was
Wow.
terrifying, right?
Right, yeah.
And it started to get really bad. Like I had to go to the hospital and get fluids. I couldn't
Mhm.
eat. I was at work one day and I realized I had to go to the bathroom and I tried to rush. I didn't make it. And I actually shit
Mhm.
my pants at work. It was the most
Oh.
mortifying moment of my
Oh my
life.
gosh,
Yeah,
yeah.
really bad. And so I
Oh my
realized
goodness.
like I was deteriorating and I didn't know what
Yeah.
was wrong. I had been diagnosed with a few different things, depending on the
Uh-huh.
doctors I went to, based on
Mm.
different levels of blood tests, but nobody really could pinpoint it. They were kind of calling it something autoimmune. And
Mhm.
so as all of this was going on, at the time, I had 2 roommates, one of which was my older sister's friend who had recently moved to the city. And so she
Mhm.
moved in, but she had gotten a boyfriend. And so she spent less than half the week at the house. And so
Mhm.
the other roommate was a guy I knew from college who was a clinical pharmacist. And so he was on
Mhm.
residency.
Okay.
And he, just by chance, was the one home all the time. So
Mhm.
he really, because he knew the medical system and because I couldn't even drive myself places, he
Mhm.
really became, increasingly my full-time caretaker. And
Wow.
he would, at first just take me to my appointments and start to, pick up my prescriptions. But as
Mhm.
time got on, I couldn't get off the couch some days. And
Mhm.
he would, begin to cook dinner for me and care for me. And probably about 2 months into this, I started to develop feelings for him.
Mm.
And at the time, it was super weird for me because I had never been with a man, and to my conscious
Mhm.
knowledge, never been interested in a man. And
Okay.
so I'm
Mm.
here, and part of me, to get you into my frame of mind, part of me is thinking like, am I just afraid I'm going to die? And I am so desperate that there's
Oh,
a human within proximity and like here is
right.
somebody. So
Yeah.
I was so confused. I didn't really know what was going on right now. And
Mhm.
I'm sitting here and I think it was also this moment where, because I thought I could die any day now, I was doing some radical therapies. Like, of
Mhm.
course, I was doing Reiki and acupuncture and reflexology, but I was
Okay.
also writing handwritten letters to every member of my family, telling them everything I've never said. Like, just
Oh,
putting it out there, whatever I
yeah.
could do to get better. And so, in that mindset, I thought, this doesn't feel sexual. This doesn't even feel romantic, but it feels like
Mhm.
something.
Mhm.
And normally in life, I'd probably brush this under the rug. But here
Mhm.
I am thinking I could die. I made a
Yeah.
promise to myself that I would speak up about anything because if I'm
Mhm.
vomiting blood, something's been stuffed down. I got to kind of let it out. And
Mhm.
I said, you know what? If I could die tomorrow, I've just got to speak up.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I didn't know how he would react. And I kind of thought it was going to be negative. But
Yeah.
I thought, what the heck? I'm going to do this. And so I
Mhm.
said to him, Garrett, I don't know how you'll take this or react, but I feel something. Something is going on here. I don't know what you're feeling. And lucky for me, Garrett is the most thoughtful person in the world. And so he's kind of like,
Oh.
oh, okay. Like, I'm listening. Let me sit and think without reacting. And
Uh-huh.
that led to about 2 months of conversations where we
Yeah.
started talking about this. And he had felt some connection too.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to begin to explore a relationship it took us over 2 years. And so
Oh,
in that
wow.
time, we still dated women.
Mm-hmm.
We're not exclusive with one another, but we explored, can we be interested? And can
Mm-hmm.
this even work? Like, is there even intimacy that's possible? I remember,
Right.
a lot of people say to me like, oh, when you met Garrett and you fell in love, like
Mm-hmm.
kissing must have felt natural.
Mm-hmm.
No, kissing felt so unnatural. I had never felt facial hair while kissing someone before. And we didn't kiss for a long time because it felt so uncomfortable for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was this real touch and go where we were having to explore, you know, do we have these desires? Can we explore things? We use
Mm-hmm.
pornography to watch, like, is there something that feels safe to not act out, but that we could be interested in?
Mm-hmm.
And as we were kind of going through this process of navigating it, I knew I needed to leave my job, right? Because if I'm getting this
Mm-hmm.
sick, something is wrong.
Still sick
And
at this point.
still sick. So I was
Oh,
sick now
wow.
for about 4 months. So I was
Mm-hmm.
starting to get better at this
Oh,
point,
man.
but I
Mm-hmm.
knew I needed to leave this job. Like it was not sustainable for me. And so I decided to give a year's notice at work.
Okay.
Now, for
Wow.
anyone listening, I
I would love
never,
that.
never recommend you do that
Oh.
because, yeah, it was, because I'm on my way out. I'm 1 foot out the door, 1 foot in. Like, I'm being pushed out of projects and left out of things, but I still have to be there. It
Oh.
was a horrible year. And to
Wow.
add to this year, what's happening is I didn't have a plan for my future. So I
Mm-hmm.
had, because herbalism had helped me so much, I had enrolled in a full-time herbal school
Okay.
and a nutrition school. So
Yeah.
I am working full time, going to herbal school and nutrition school,
Wow.
navigating my first same-sex relationship, and trying
Mm-hmm.
to heal myself. It was
Oh,
by
my
far
goodness.
the worst year of my life. Terrible,
Oh,
terrible year.
that's a
But
lot.
yeah, it's a lot. So as that year kind of wrapped up, my plan was to be the herbalist to Boston's entrepreneurs because I was
Mm-hmm.
really sick. I knew a lot of these people are really stressed out. I wanted to help them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it just kind of happened that at the exact moment, like in December, that I left my job, Garrett and I had made a deadline that we were going to tell our families about us because we had
Mm-hmm.
been together now for about 2 years. We realized that this is serious. We had moved in
Mm-hmm.
just the two of us. We were now exclusive. And we told our families. And I'll never forget what my dad said.
Wow.
I told him this, and my dad said, so you're telling me that you're leaving your well-paid job and you found yourself a rich boyfriend. You are so smart. And so,
Wow, go dad.
right, exactly. I did not expect that. I didn't, and
Oh.
most people were supportive. Some people weren't, but they got on board eventually. I won't name
Mm-hmm.
names today, but so that was going on, and I was now this herbalist.
Uh-huh.
And if I'm being honest with you, I didn't love it. Wasn't making a lot of money, and I thought, okay, all right. I didn't just leave my job for nothing. Like, I've got
Mm-hmm.
to do something here. And so I thought, I have all these rich stories. Now, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
ready to talk about my relationship just yet, but
Right.
I was, at this point where I was thinking, like, I had a lot of success early in life. I
Mm-hmm.
got really sick. I realized it wasn't what I was cracked up to be. I've learned
Mm-hmm.
so much that I feel like is a perspective I want to share. And so I started a blog, and my blog got decently popular. And about 3 months after this, I got a random email one day, and
Mm-hmm.
someone said, hey, I'm a publisher of this publishing company. Do you want a book deal? I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
publish your voice.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so I'm saying that, like, does this happen? Like,
Yeah.
what is this? Is this a scam? Is this real? And so I signed that book deal, and
Oh,
I was
my
writing this book.
goodness.
Right. Like right out of the gates when I started this business. And so I'm writing this book deal about redefining success for a new
Mm-hmm.
generation. And in the book, they really wanted me to talk about my relationship, and I did. And then I realized after I turned in that manuscript, oh shit. Like, I haven't told all these
Mm-hmm.
people in my life, right? Like,
Cats out
I
the
have to tell
bag.
people before it's on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. I can't
Yes.
like let people find out that way. So
Oh,
I thought, okay,
wow.
all right. So my family knows and a few close friends, but I need to tell more people about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to write about it on my blog.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to write a little blog post, send it out, and maybe a few thousand people see it. Great. And so I wrote it on this blog post. And at the time, I was writing a lot for a national publication, but it's a very niche publication. They're really health specific. And they said, Mike, could we republish what you had written and just give me a few more details? And I thought, okay, it's already out there. No big deal. That's fine. So I sent it to them, and I went to bed that night. And I woke up the next morning, and 100,000 people had shared it.
Oh my goodness.
So it was the most overwhelming experience of my life to wake up knowing that millions of people are talking about your sex life.
Yeah.
NPR called me, Huffington Post, Yahoo News, wanting to talk about my sex life. And here's the thing, I'm still exploring my sexuality at this moment. So people, I had in my inbox, this is the worst feeling in the world, to wake up to thousands of emails in my inbox, literally thousands. And people are asking me intimate questions about my sex life and asking me to defend my sexuality when I wasn't even clear on what it was. And so I'm sitting here trying to explore this. Got a lot of hate mail, as you can imagine, and also some supportive messages from all over the world from people who are exploring sexuality, pansexuality, bisexuality. And I felt like I was thrust into this platform that I didn't feel prepared for. I didn't know what the heck was going on here.
Right. Yeah.
And I never wanted people, this wasn't what I wanted to be known for. I didn't want my relationship to be the only thing because, I'm at this moment where I didn't even know what I was doing for work, right? Like right now I have this book deal. I've got millions of people talking about me and I'm making like $0 and I don't have a business model. And I just felt like such a failure and such a mess. And so I thought, you know what? I'm just going to become obsessed with life purpose. Like, how do these things have anything to do with one another, right? Because here we've got, branding and public relations. We've got herbalism and health coaching. We've got, same-sex relationship, vomiting blood, like viral article, like what the heck is going on in my life? Everyone says they're all over the place. This is what all over the place looks like. So
all Mike.
It's all me. So, I read all these books and, I'm not kidding you when I say I've probably read every life purpose book out there. I've done every training. I cannot tell you how many times in my life I have heard, you will know your purpose by the end of these 60 minutes. I've heard it many times, almost never happens. But, eventually you start to realize most of the stuff says the same things. It says, figure out your passions, figure out your skills, figure out what the world needs and find that middle point. And I thought, okay. So how do these things connect, right? How does this work, Mike? And I thought, oh my gosh, it's so obvious. I meant to create a blogging course. And this blogging course, it's going to be about getting a book deal, sure. But it's also going to be about finding your voice, knowing who you are, healing yourself. This is my big connecting thread.
Yeah.
And so I had at this point like no money left because this is the end of this year. I'm living off my savings. But I felt like I knew my purpose. All these books told me, you've got to go pro. You've got to really go for it. And I thought, okay, I got to go pro. So I've got the fancy lighting kit and the microphone and the business partner, web designer, editing software, you name it. Thousands of dollars later, I put into this thing. I just knew this was going to take off. And I put it out into the world. And I think 5 people bought it. It was a colossal failure.
Oh.
And I lost thousands of dollars on this thing. And I just felt like I'm done. I'm so done because it wasn't like I didn't really go for it. Like I went for love. I went for leaving the job. I had a book, the viral article. Like I put myself out there and the world is saying it doesn't want what I have. And I was so devastated by this moment that I decided I was quitting. I was going back to public relations and I was going to beg my partners to take me back. I didn't know if I had a job at my own company, but beg them to take me back. And I couldn't do this anymore. And so, my thinking before I left, I didn't want to leave with my tail between my legs. So I thought, let me host a failure celebration. And the thinking around that was really like, hey, at least I did things that got me to failure. At least I took risks. Like that's got to be worth something here.
Exactly.
So I took the one thing I was still confident at in the world, which is branding and public relations. And I said, okay, I'm just going to offer free branding sessions for as many entrepreneurs as I can do. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did 9 hours, like 6 sessions in one day. I had to stop sessions to pee, but I didn't care. I was just doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, I'm used to working with a lot of, like I said, tech entrepreneurs and, healthcare politicians and celebrities. But a lot
Right.
of these people were artists and psychics and
Yeah.
healers and life coaches and all types of cool people. And I did these sessions, and every single one of them said to me some variation of, Mike, you didn't just tell me my brand, you explained my
Mm-hmm.
life purpose. It's answering all of my questions.
Hmm.
And so I'm sitting there like, what are you smoking? What is wrong with you? I don't understand what's happening here.
Yeah.
Something, I don't get it. After the second one, I was kind of like, are they talking to one another? I don't know what's happening here. And I get off that last call and I thought, well, at this point, what do I have to lose? So I did this process on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 2 hours, I was exhausted, but 2 hours of this process, I came out with 6 words.
Mm-hmm.
And those 6 words are aligned, zany, free, unmistakable, successful, and
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable.
Mm.
And I sit there and there was just this kind of like this light bulb moment where I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I have never been as safe to be vulnerable or felt like I can't make a mistake or as zany and weird as I am with Garrett. And in
Mm-hmm.
public relations, I can see why I was successful in helping people be vulnerable and unmistakable, but I wasn't able to be zany. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I was successful, but not fulfilling. And it just, as I kind of was mapping all these experiences
Mm.
in my life, I was like, I've always been successful. When I feel these things, I'm not over here. So I'm kind of having my
Mm-hmm.
little epiphany over here. And I
Yeah.
go and I check my email. And one of the women I worked with that day, she emailed me and said, hey, Mike, can, my friend buy this? I was raving about this. My friend wants to work with you. Do you sell
Mm-hmm.
this? What do you call it? And I was like, I don't know. It's not a thing. Like, it's just branding. And I was like, well, you're
Mm-hmm.
telling me it's, life purpose. I guess I'll call it sacred branding. Slap that
Mm-hmm.
name on. Didn't think much about it. And the next day I said, okay, I'll take on this one client. I worked with
Mm-hmm.
her. Well, the day after that, I had 2 new clients. And 3 weeks later, I had 30 clients.
Oh
And
my
that
gosh.
was 7 years ago. And so here we
Wow.
are. I never ended up going back to public relations. But one
Yeah.
thing, and I've done a lot of work now with, gender and sexuality and so many of these topics, in addition to business and, you name it. But
Mm-hmm.
what I've really come to understand about life is that the way we look at purpose and the way I looked at purpose is really inherently flawed. And we look
Mm-hmm.
at it a lot of times like it's something that we achieve or aspire to. But in
Mm-hmm.
actuality, what we have, even when we're babies, before we have language, is we have sensitivities. We're all
Yeah.
sensitive to certain things. Some
Mm-hmm.
babies are sensitive to freedom, some are sensitive to connection. And when I started to understand what I was most sensitive to through that lens,
Mm.
all of these crazy stories that seem so out there started to make sense.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's crazy how all of this snowballed together to become what you're doing now professionally. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty amazing. And just touching on the, as babies, we have sensitivities and stuff, just even comparing my 2 kids, we spoke about my son
Mm-hmm.
going to college earlier, and just even speaking about my 2 kids, like same household, same
Mm-hmm.
parents, same upbringing. Maybe my little girl's a little lax because she's a baby, but it just, but so different in
Yes.
personalities because they're
Yes.
just uniquely who they are.
Yes.
My son desires, he wants to please people. He wants to make people happy. And the moment he feels like he's disappointed at me, like he's just like, don't talk to him. He's like in his own rut, and then my daughter, completely different, very
Yep.
outgoing, very, and it's amazing. And you're right that I think a lot of times people go, what's your why? And I can never really fully answer that because I don't
Yeah.
have one objective. I don't have
Yeah.
one like aha moment that I'm reaching for or aspiring to do. So this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well, I think that's, so often people will say to me, well, Mike, you do purpose stuff. I know all about my purpose. I'm meant to be a life coach. I'm meant to be a podcaster. I'm meant to write a book. And I'm like, that is so awesome. But here's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. If you can
Mm-hmm.
achieve it, that means you can also fail it. And that doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
any sense. How could you fail your
Right.
purpose? And
Yeah.
furthermore, if you can achieve it, that implies you didn't have it at a certain point.
Mm.
So did you just not have a purpose as a baby? That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And what about your relationships? What about your friendships? Do you not have purpose there? Of course you do. This idea that
Mm-hmm.
purpose is this like one achievable thing that's usually related to our
Mm-hmm.
job, right? That's how we talk about usually.
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. And that creates shame because then we think, well, what's wrong with me? I don't know my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with me? Rather than purpose isn't the thing that's out there. It's what makes us feel purposeful. Any moment that I am feeling aligned, zany,
Yes.
free, unmistakable, successful, and vulnerable is a moment that I feel purposeful. And the
Yeah.
friendships or relationships or jobs or interviews that make me feel that, I'm going to light up. You're going to see me come alive and feel more of me. And the places where I can't be that, I am going to shrivel up. Because here's the thing. It's kind of, we've all have this experience that I can give us here. We
Yeah.
all have the experience of having coffee with a best friend. And hours fly by and genius just spills out of us and we feel so good and we feel so easy and we forget to try. And then we have those other conversations where we're kind of like, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And we get very awkward and technical. And if we're awkward and technical, I always say, we have no idea what the essence is. We're not tapped into who we are because you never have to try to be yourself. If you're trying, it means you're being somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I want this interview. I want my relationship. I want my friendships. I want my job to just feel like having coffee with a best friend where I just get to do what I naturally do and let that flow out of me.
Yeah. Wow. You make me want to go quit my job. No, no, but it's so like, it's powerful. I've worked with a mindset coach before. And I remember, I think it was like 5 words that we had to pick that really was what I aspire to be on a day-to-day basis. And this very much connects with what you're saying as well, is your 6 words. And, you know, for you to have those 6 words applicable in any given situation is when you are at your prime, at your best, you know, performing at your highest. And so absolutely, I totally understand what you're saying. And thank you for bringing that to the table, because I think a lot of times people do create a goal, a big scary goal, you know, whatever it may be, and then think that that's what they need to aspire to do. But like you're saying, if you can achieve it, you can fail it. So what really is your purpose? And your purpose is just being you, being naturally, authentically you.
Exactly. So, and we're hardwired. We feel good and alive when we are ourselves, and we feel the opposite. And, you know, no disrespect to your mindset coach, because I think it's amazing. But in this work, one thing that we look at is not just what we're aspiring to be, because that's so beautiful and that's so helpful, but what we naturally subconsciously do without even realizing it, every moment of success. And so what starts to happen, which is really interesting, because it's you know, people always say like, oh, I know my 6 words. I say, oh, that's so beautiful, wonderful. But what we want is mapping. We want to, so what we will do, you know, sacred brain session would take me 2.5 hours. But what we do is we start to map, you know, so it's quite a lengthy, we go through your trauma, we go through a whole, I mean, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we're just having a conversation, but I am doing things behind the scenes. But what we're doing is we're mapping these in your language. And this is important because I'm a big fan of personality tests. But at the end of the day, like, what the heck do these words mean? They're somebody else's words. They're not how I connect with language. And so what we do is a really cool thing where once we begin to understand these core sensitivities of your life, and we might have 200 or 300, right? Then what we start to do is map the way your mind uses language. So we'll say, well, if you are real, are you automatically authentic? If that's true, we don't need authentic. And we start to map it inside. And so when we come to these 6 words will represent 300 words, thousands of things you told me, every experience of your life. It needs to capture that feeling of every experience for it to make sense.
Oh, wow. I really want to sit in this 2.5 hour session with you. I want to know my 6 words.
Well, here's the good thing. So I know some people, sure, you want to come hire me, come hang out with me. But for everybody, we have a free thing on our website. It's really simple. So you can just download the worksheet, and there's a 36-minute little training that's going to help you go through it. It's free at mikeiamele.com/map, MAP. And you can just go start doing it today. So if you want to get a little sense, you're like, Mike, screw you, I just want a few words. Go do that. It's totally free, and you can get started that way.
Okay. So what's the typical perfect type of client for you? What is the perfect type of person that you see and you're like, oh my goodness, we need to sit down for 2.5 hours?
Oh my gosh, that really depends on the day. You know, I love, I've worked with so many different people. So I've worked with actors, you know, performers, podcasters, entrepreneurs, healers, you name it. But what I'm really interested in lately, I'm working with a lot of people in the queer community, in the disabled community, people who are doing a lot of advocacy and activism, who are really excited about the work that they're doing. So I've had a few sessions. So I do 2 sessions a day sometimes, which is a lot. So I've had 2 sessions today on it. But, you know, that's been really, really fun for me to help people who feel like they're really connected to this great cause.
Mm-hmm.
But you ask me on the day, like I will be, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I'll do this. I'll just say like, hey, I want to work with people on on relationships or improving your sexuality. And I'll just put it
Mm-hmm.
out to my list or something. And if somebody is down with that, we do it. Here's
Yeah.
my dirty little secret that I don't usually say in interviews. It doesn't matter what you want to use it for. All
Yeah.
that changes is the last 20 minutes when I tell you how to apply it. But
Mm-hmm.
mapping sensitivities, your sensitivity is the same anywhere of your life. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to use it for business and then you're like, hey, I really want to improve my sex life, guess what? It's the same thing. And I teach a really
Okay.
fun class on
Huh.
your brand in bed and how to use it
Yeah.
for sexuality.
Oh, that's fun. I
It
like
is
that.
fun.
I like that a lot. I like it. Awesome. So now that you've mentioned with the LGBTQIA community and the disabled community, with everything that's been going on in the past year and a half, 2 years,
Yeah.
with DEI, with diversity, exclusivity, and inclusion, I imagine you're pretty busy. So what are some of the things that, like some of the projects or maybe some of the areas that you feel compelled to speak about or speak to?
Yeah, I think that we've obviously seen a lot of, murder of trans women this year,
Mm.
which is something that's, near and dear to my heart and something I was actually working on earlier today. This was
Wow.
really upsetting. We've seen tremendous amount of racism and violence towards racism, and some of it,
Mm-hmm.
is only being newly reported on or talked about, but has been happening for a long time. So,
Yes.
of course, that is
Mm-hmm.
great that we're having conversations about. Um,
Yes.
Upsetting that it's been going on forever and not been talked about, but regardless, I think it's been exciting to watch some new movement in some of these places, sometimes traumatizing and
Mm-hmm.
triggering as well. So there's all that I want to honor. One thing
Mm-hmm.
I've really been excited about this year as well is doing a lot of work with body liberation and decolonizing views of the body, which I think is a
Okay.
really exciting area of work. And I
Yeah.
think the wellness and nutrition industries are having a reckoning at these intersections of like
Mm-hmm.
fat phobia and racism and all these things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, honestly, it depends on the day. Like these are a few things top of mind, but I'm really
Yeah.
excited about a lot of these topics, of
That's
course.
awesome. That's really great. So let's backtrack a little bit to the previous topic that we did discuss. But if anybody were to approach you or reach out to you, Mike, and just say, I think I am I am going through a similar journey that you did when
Yeah.
you were starting to realize that you had feelings for your roommate, and what are some of the key things that you would, I don't know, I guess advise them on, or how would you redirect them or give them resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that it may be case by case. I say the first thing
Mm-hmm.
to anybody when we're talking about sexual exploration or coming out journey is making
Mm-hmm.
sure that we are physically safe. And so, if we
Yeah.
are in a country or a place or a situation where our physical safety may be at risk, it's
Mm-hmm.
something we definitely want to just make sure that we're okay and we're not putting ourselves in a dangerous situation. I know we
Mm-hmm.
don't always know the answer to that. So, again, that's why it can be case by case. But
Yeah.
that's my first thing just to say, which probably isn't the popular answer,
Uh-huh.
but is one that I
Yeah.
want to, check in on people. But, I think that it starts within first. It starts with really
Mm-hmm.
exploring our own sexuality for ourselves. And, if we have a partner who's on that journey with us, that's beautiful
Mm-hmm.
because we can have conversation. But it also makes that complicated because we may be on two different timelines with that
Mm-hmm.
journey. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the advice for pretty much any relationship, whether it be a queer one or not, is
Mm-hmm.
extreme vulnerability and really being open and honest about where you're at and what you're needing at this moment. I think is just
Mm-hmm.
beautiful advice. And
Yeah.
when it comes to sex and sexuality, my rule always is the only definition of good sex is sex that feels good for everybody involved. It doesn't
Mm.
matter how long it lasts. It doesn't matter what the
Mm-hmm.
performance is. None of that matters, right? Like I think
Yeah.
we always talk about sex like it's performance based. And guess what? It's not. It's
Huh.
connection based, right? It's really
Yeah.
about connecting with a person. That's all it is. And even
Yeah.
if it's a one night stand, it doesn't matter. It's actually about connection. I think we are so warped by this world of porn and social media, and that's telling us. And so I
Mm-hmm.
want to say
Mm-hmm.
that, if ever something doesn't feel good and you're exploring
Mm-hmm.
something, you can
Mm-hmm.
always stop at any time. The analogy I love to give for people is especially if we are being penetrated in any way. So if we're a
Mm-hmm.
receptive partner, when I go to
Mm-hmm.
a restaurant and I order food and I take a bite and I realize I don't like eating this, I don't need to keep eating it, right? Just because I took a bite doesn't
Right.
mean that I am, now obligated to keep eating this. I can stop halfway through the meal. I can say,
Yeah.
hey, excuse me, this needs to be heated up, or I can say anything I want. I can ask for what I need, because if something is going into especially my body, I want to be really clear that I have control over that. And I never have to feel bad or obligated if, I want to change or renegotiate the boundaries around this. And I say all that because, I think that's just good advice for anyone, period. But especially if we're in this exploration phase, it's okay to change our mind. And we don't have to feel indebted or obligated to do anything we don't want to.
Oh, that's such great advice. That's so great. Thank you. I mean, I'm a parent of teenagers, and so I feel like that's so applicable in so many ways. And what you're saying about both are, consensually and comfortable in that sense together. They both are in that moment and they're connected. And as long as the two are comfortable and enjoying the moment, it doesn't matter performance level.
Right.
And then also being able to walk away when you finally realize it's not appropriate for you. And I've had my past where I felt like there's no longer a connection, but I'm there for just the sake of being there, and I think I've even mentioned before in the past that, sometimes it's like, you don't want to break up with this person because then you're breaking up with the friend group and you don't want to walk away from that friend group, or at least in my case it was. And I felt like that was probably one of the dumbest thing I could have ever done, was just remain in a relationship just because I enjoyed the friend group and not necessarily the guy that I was with. And so it's a shame. And I think this message needs to be heard more. And a lot of, our young ones and our adults need to hear this, is that, you can walk away at any time and not feel ashamed for what you've done, or not feel obligated to stay in anything for any reason. And I think also that's how, certain types of relationships or domestic violence relationships kind of start snowballing into that, is because one person in the relationship no longer feels like this is safe or appropriate, but they're staying just for the sake of children, or they're staying for the sake of whatever financial reasons or whatever the case is. This is where it's coming from, and not having this foundation that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And I want to honor all those situations, because it is complicated and we have these ties, and, for anyone who's in those situations, to release the shame from it, but to also recognize that, relationships are about connection first and foremost. And so if we're not feeling that connection, or we're not feeling safe, and that's another point. I know I'm all over the place, but this feels important to bring in, is that boundaries aren't just about protection. Boundaries also about safe expression. And so we can be very proactive with our boundaries. I know for me, when I say, Garrett, I need sex that is vulnerable and able to talk about what I'm feeling in the moment, that's setting a boundary. That's saying this is what I need for safe expression, right? Or if I'm working with a client and we're talking about a sexual issue and they start to, have a maybe sexualizing conversation, and I just lovingly remind them, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm so glad you're exploring your sexuality, and, keep kicking ass in that exploration. Let's continue on with this. I don't need to, it's about what's going to make me safe to express myself. And so it's not just kind of on the defensive or the hiding place, which it may be at sometimes, but I also want all of us to have really strong boundaries in every relationship we have, to be able to express ourselves, because that's our gift to the world.
Yeah, that's really important. And I feel like, and this goes back to like what you were saying earlier about, when you go to work, you only feel 1, 2, 3 of your 6 things on your list, and that's why you're not feeling fulfilled. And I think a lot of times people find themselves in that situation where they're not able to express themselves or, be authentically them. And so when they're in that situation, they don't feel fulfilled, they're not happy, work becomes a chore, or whatever, relationship you're having, whether it's professional or intimate, becomes more of an obligation. And that's where this all comes in. So understanding yourself first and foremost is incredibly important.
Yeah. And understanding your needs. Sometimes if I'm ever in a fight with my husband, knock on wood, doesn't happen often, but let's say it does, and I check in and say, okay, which word am I not feeling? Oh, vulnerable. And I might say to him, Garrett, I don't feel that I can be totally vulnerable here. There are parts of me that feel like I'm going to be judged. And the thing about that is, number one, I'm talking about my needs. And number two, I'm not necessarily putting all the blame on him, because I'm noticing part of it's on me that I may be, and part of it's on asking him to help me create more safety. And what's interesting is the conversation always changes, because what we thought we were fighting about is no longer what we're talking about. We're actually talking about how can we support one another. And here's the real magic, is I know his sensitivities too. So I'm able to address and talk about those and realize the ways that we support one another. Where I'm vulnerable, he's safe. Where I am successful, he's proud. Where I am zany, he comes alive. And so we're able to watch how they can work with one another and recognize that when he's maybe not feeling something, what part of me supports him to feel it more.
Oh, wow. Now my husband and I have to sit down with you for 2.5 hours.
All right.
Wow. Yeah. And so what I hear too is that this is a lot of what we do in like healthcare, and because I work in pediatrics, is being able to de-escalate certain types of situation. When you have a very stressful situation in pediatrics where the child is having surgery or just was given a diagnosis, parent is very upset, but they don't know how to express their anger, their frustration, their grief over the new news or the current situation. We then have to come in and be able to de-escalate. And so what you were saying with like your vulnerability and taking ownership in that is a lot of what we teach in de-escalation of that as well, is being able to say, I apologize that you feel this way right now. And I understand that it's a very stressful situation for you, but then really just kind of like flipping the script so that you're not blaming them per se anymore. You're actually kind of taking that, you're acknowledging that you hear and see and feel what they're feeling, but then like, how can we move on from this? What can we do together to move on from this? And that's incredibly important. That's great feedback. Look, we're all over the place today.
We are all over. Well, if you don't mind, just because you brought up children, I think this is, people always ask me, Mike, like, where do you want the work to grow, or what are you excited about in the future? And this is very nascent, so this is not something that I'm doing a lot of, but I'm really excited about bringing this work to children. And one thing I've done some experimentation with is with my niece. And so I knew 2.5 hours, 6-year-old's not going to sit for 2.5 hours, but I can get them for 20 minutes and that's okay. And so I had to learn how to adapt this work for a child. And, so we did the work with my niece. It was just an experimentation. This was a few years ago. And she went on her merry way. And one of her sensitivities was quiet. I thought, interesting, but okay. Didn't think much of it. And so about a month later, I got a phone call from my mom. And my mom said, "You won't believe what happened today. It's miraculous." And I said, "Okay, well, what happened?" She said, "Well, my niece was at kindergarten and a little girl has been bullying her. And the little girl was bullying her about being really shy and awkward. And my niece said to her, my uncle told me that one of my superpowers, that's what I called it. So one of my superpowers is quiet. And that's what makes me really special. And, I bet you have superpowers too. If you asked my uncle, he could tell you your superpowers." And I just thought how miraculous that not only did she not internalize bullying, right?
Yeah.
And she saw who she is as a superpower rather than negative, but she actually had the compassion to tell this little girl and the foresight to realize this little girl probably didn't feel her own superpowers, to say, hey, you can have superpowers too.
Wow, I love her. That was so sweet. That was such a cute story.
Isn't it so sweet?
I absolutely love that. That is very, very sweet. And it just, kids amaze me. The way that they process the information and the perception that they come from, and then the stuff that comes out of their mouth. And you're just like, wow, did we really did I teach her that? Did I teach him that? And it's pretty amazing. So that's awesome. Go Uncle Mike. Wow. So I think that we have had so much of a discussion, but sometimes I don't know what I don't know, Mike. So is there something that you would love to talk about that we just haven't had a chance to discuss yet?
Oh gosh, there are a million things I would love to talk about today, but I think that for all of us, to bring it back to our core of what we've been talking about here around purpose is that, again, you never have to try to be yourself. If you're trying, it means you're being somebody else. And I think for so many of us, we've been told that we're too much or not enough, right? We've been told that, you're too intense or too loud or too sensitive or too emotional. At least I have been told all those things.
Yes.
And so, the way I think about it is it's kind of like if I had a big pot of water and I tried to pour that water into a little cup and it spilled all over the floor, I wouldn't yell at and shame the water for being too much. I would get a bigger pot. And these days, whenever anybody says to me, Mike, you're too much, what I hear is, you're too much for me to handle in this container. They're telling me the container is too small for my essence. And that's okay. That's beautiful. That just means it's not the right fit. It's not the right, there's nothing on them, nothing on me. This isn't the right fit. And I can say, okay, thank you. This isn't the right client, the right job, the right friend, the right relationship, the right whatever.
Yeah.
And I think about that with everything when it comes to, sexuality, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to work, when it comes to purpose. Your essence is right. You're not
Mm-hmm.
the cup, you're the water. And remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. Our entire lives
Love
are
that.
pouring water from one cup to the next, right? From
Yeah.
job to relationship to this job to this thing.
Yeah.
But we all think it's the cup. We think we're the
Yeah.
cup. And so we're like, I need the perfect job. I need the perfect relationship.
Uh-huh.
We're not that. We're the essence. We're the water
Right.
inside. And when we
Yes.
know that, all of a sudden, because here's what's going to happen for all of us. People come to me, who've just retired or lost their job or got divorced. And they'll say to me, oh my God, I need to find my purpose over again. And what I'll say is, your purpose is the same purpose it was. Why that relationship felt so good is why this thing over here feels so good. It's not about the cup. When you know that water, you just need to build a new cup to fit that water. You need to find a new way to feel vulnerable and zany and free, or whatever your words are. And when it comes to body image, I want to say this too. I did not have an empowered relationship with my body. I did not feel good about my body for years. And I have always been thin, and here's where people are not going to love me. I've always seen it as a real shameful thing. Some people, when I say this, they're like, what? I haven't gained weight in 20 years. So I have not gained more than 5 pounds in 20 years, which I know some people are like, screw you, Mike. But for me, I've always felt too thin, right? And I always didn't love my body because I really stopped growing and developing. And so years ago, I've helped so many people with this work. And I thought, well, come on, Mike, you do this work. You can help yourself. So I thought, okay, with my body, what would make me feel zany and vulnerable and free? And I thought, oh my gosh, dancing naked in front of the mirror. And so every day for a year, as that water was heating up, I danced naked, vulnerably, zanily, freely, and looked at my body and forced myself. Even on the days when I didn't like that mark or this angle or I felt ugly, I still looked. I didn't miss a day for 365 days.
Wow.
And at the end of that year, I didn't even get at the time that these were related, but I booked my first boudoir photo session.
Okay.
And I had my first time that I was nude in a non-sexual setting with a stranger. And I got these photos back, and I didn't even know if I was going to show my husband. Like, these were very private. Nobody was going to see them. I got those photos back. And the whole shoot, we had worked on vulnerable and zany and all these things. And I got those photos back, and I felt so sexy. My mom's seen them. They're all over the internet. I don't care who has seen these photos. Because
my goodness.
It was the first time in my life I saw myself, my body through my sensitivities. Not what the media says, not social media, not magazines, my sensitivities. And it changed the way I see myself.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's beautiful. I have headshots soon. I might have to do this.
Yeah.
I might have to do I maybe have only 30 days until headshots, but yeah. Wow. Okay. And I had something in my mind to ask you and I totally forgot. So it'll maybe come back. All right. So if I gave you a billboard, Mike, what would your billboard say?
Oh gosh, I think I've got to go with, I've been saying it already today. You never have to try to be yourself. If you're trying, it means you're being somebody else.
Yes. And I think being authentic is so, so important. And I really appreciate you really hammering that one in. So if our clients or if our guests would like to reach out to you and get to know you better, have questions about just exploring their sexuality or even finding their purpose and sitting down and having a great 2.5-hour session with you, where can they find you at?
Absolutely. So you can just go to mikeiamele.com if you want that free training we talked about. It's mikeiamele.com/map, M-A-P. You can come hang out with me on Instagram. We're having a lot of conversations about confidence, body image, and sexuality over there. So a lot of people, especially the LGBT community, is having some amazing conversations over there that I definitely want to encourage you if you feel called to join. And feel free to just shoot me an email if you like anytime, or shoot me an Instagram DM now that I'm slowly getting active on there. And I would love to hear more about what's going on for you and support you if I can.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for coming out today, sharing your vulnerable story with us, and just, being such a breath of fresh air. I really love your message and the things that you're doing for the community and people out there. And so thank you so much for spending some time with me this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.